Are you a business owner or entrepreneur who's had great success in the business world, and now you want to launch a speaking career to share your message with the world? If that's you, then listen up. 25-year speaking industry veteran Bret Ridgway has released his latest special report, 3 key things entrepreneurs must master to build a profitable speaking business. To pick up your copy, go to bretridgway.com/freebie. Welcome to the Spotlight on Speaking show with Bret Ridgway, where you'll learn the keys to building a profitable speaking business from speaking industry pros. Each week, we interview a great guest who will share his or her speaking journey, identify what their keys to success have been, and highlight some critical mistakes they've made along the way that you'll want to avoid. Be sure to visit our website at spotlightonspeaking.com. And while you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, sit back, tune in, and get ready to meet this week's guest.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Spotlight on Speaking show with Bret Ridgway. I'm your host, and I'm excited to have as my guest today, Dan Klepstad. Did I pronounce that right, Dan?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'm off and running in good ways. So Dan's a longtime radio host and newscaster. His most recent book, DIY Book Promo, aims to help writers find readers without spending money. It includes lessons from that campaign for his novel, Fiona's Guardians, including how to co-brand with indie bookstores. He also shares tips on how to pitch media for interviews and perform well in front of the mic. So Dan, welcome to the Spotlight on Speaking show.
Well, Bret, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm excited to have you here, Dan, because you got a background that's a bit unique for the guests I've had on the show previously. So, tell us a little bit about Dan first. How did you get into the whole radio thing in the first place?
Well, I answered an ad in the student paper at Northern Illinois University. They were looking for a jazz host on Tuesday nights. And you probably know that many public radio stations, NPR stations, are located on college or university campuses. And so I went in, I got the job, and had to suddenly learn about jazz. Did all sorts of research quickly before I walked in the studio and learned how to spin a record. I was used to CDs in the early 90s, but actually we still had LPs. And I had to do that quarter turn back so that when you start the record, it doesn't go like that. So it was fun. I loved it. I got the bug, and soon I was doing news, including morning news.
Is that on the radio, or did you ever get into TV news also?
Well, I've been interviewed on television stations, but I've never been hired by a TV station. I found that I just flourished in radio. I just liked the medium. Radio's always been special to me. It's a more intimate medium. And I think this gets to the heart of public speaking, because when you speak to the listener, they are often alone in their car, their kitchen, bathroom, or maybe they have an old-fashioned clock radio that wakes them up in the morning or helps them drift off at night. And so I learned early on to speak as if I was speaking to one person, which of course in broadcasting, you're speaking to thousands. But if you make it sound like you're speaking to one person, you'll be a successful radio host. And I think that translates well into public speaking.
Now, Dan, you mentioned records and clock radios. You're kind of dating yourself a little bit here, man.
I am Gen X,
All right. So how did you make the transition into becoming a book author and teaching people how to promote their books? And that's a whole different world.
It is, but they both share something in common: writing. When you're writing news copy, or even radio promo copy, or just talking something about the weather, you want to use the fewest, most powerful words. And of course, this will emphasize nouns and verbs. Those are the real powerhouses in any sentence. And you learn to cut out all the unnecessary stuff. So the modifiers like adverbs and adjectives, which can, for the ear, it will muddy your message and make it harder for the listener to pick out what's really important, what you want them to remember. And so that actually translates pretty well into writing because you're not using long dependent clauses. You're starting with a subject, verb, object, skeleton, if you will. And if you want to add more description to your writing, whether it's literature or a speech, you can do that. But if you start with the bare bones, subject, verb, object, you can then, you can build up carefully until you craft your message.
Now, I typically like to say, Dan, that there are three primary types of speakers. I mean, you can argue that there's four or five or whatever, but those are keynote speakers, platform sellers, and people who are just speaking for their business, for business awareness, to Rotaries, Kiwanis, whatever it may be. So when did you make the transition to speaking off the radio into public speaking, we'll call it? And what type of speaking specifically were you doing initially?
Well, during my radio career, I would often get sent to events. Sometimes I would be invited to, you mentioned some of the service organizations, Kiwanis, the Elks, the Moose, whatever, and they would invite me to speak about public radio. And so that's how I began to understand the platform, standing up in front of people. And I was able to pull in my radio experience, like, and my authoring experience, which was, I was writing books at the time, literature, fiction, but I hadn't really become known for it. So all this time, all these things are sort of happening in the 1990s at the same time to me. And each one, whether it's you're speaking to a group of people in an auditorium or on the radio or reading an excerpt from your novel, you're borrowing a lot of the same techniques that I just mentioned earlier.
So, do you still dabble in radio at all, Dan?
Well, actually, in 2 weeks, I'm going back to my old NPR station in Northern Illinois, WNIJ, to help with their spring fundraiser.
All right. Well, got to keep your finger in the game, right?
Yeah, yeah, help my old station.
All right. So, when you give a speech to a Rotary or whatever, you're out there just sharing some information like that. How do you evaluate if it's a successful speech? How do you know that your message has really hit home? And any particular tips for our listeners, particularly those new to the speaking game, as to how to best have their message really resonate with that audience?
Well, when people start repeating the words that you used back to you afterwards, or even during the Q&A portion, if they remember your words and phrases, that means you've done a good job of presenting your program, and they've done a very good job. You've made it easier for them to hear the words and retain the words. So again, it comes down to just keeping your message lean and memorable for the audience.
Now, there's typically a problem that many speakers have in terms of trying to overteach. They want to dazzle the audience with their brilliance and share everything they know about a subject or whatever. So, how many key points do you think a speaker should limit themselves to when they're giving a presentation?
Okay, well, I think our brains are wired to remember three things in a speech or any kind of content that we're consuming. So three is a magic number. You hear that all the time in any context. And I think if your audience members remember three key things from your speech, three key messages, you'll have done your job in terms of informing them, and you'll have also made it easier for them to remember your message.
It's interesting. Tomorrow I have to deliver a presentation for a master class, and I have 12 to 15 minutes. Like picking the three things that are the best fit there can be quite a challenge sometimes. But anyway, so what's your go-to topic these days, Dan, when you're going to go give a presentation? Somebody asks you to talk. What's your go-to topic these days?
Well, if I get invited to, it really depends on the audience that I'm going to be speaking to. So lately, I'm helping my fellow authors find their readers and to do it on the cheap without spending money, using free resources like email and social media, and just putting in their time instead of paying someone to promote their books. So you mentioned my book, DIY Book Promo. That's what I'm speaking about lately. But if I were brought into a charitable event where we're raising money for something, then I'm going to do some research ahead of time about what the organization's mission is, and then try to speak to that audience and make sure that my message resonates with the organization's mission.
All right, so I want to dive a little bit more deeply, Dan, into some of your sweet spots, your areas of expertise. But before we do that, let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsor.
Are you a business owner or entrepreneur who's had great success in the business world, and now you want to launch a speaking career to share your message with the world? If that's you, then listen up. 25-year speaking industry veteran Bret Ridgway has released his latest special report, 3 Key Things Entrepreneurs Must Master to Build a Profitable Speaking Business. To pick up your copy, go to bretridgway.com/freebie.
And we are back with the Spotlight on Speaking show, and my guest this episode is Dan Klepstad. So, Dan, you've been on the announcer end of the radio game for a while, and we know a lot of speakers like to get publicity and all that stuff, and to be interviewed or whatever. So, as a previous and still current, I guess, or upcoming radio host or whatever, what's your best advice to speakers as to how to really pitch themselves for media interviews?
I think it's always being sensitive to what the audience needs. What do they need to hear? If you are brought on, for example, again, I will be going to the WNIJ fundraiser and helping raise money for my old station. I am not really going to talk about my book. I'm going to talk about try to convince listeners to donate money to public radio. If a host asks me about my book, and I'll say, yeah, and then I'm going to be doing an event at a bookstore, whatever, keep it short. So read the room, of course, understand the context in which you are speaking. But if you are asked to tell a little bit about what you're doing lately and what your book is about, then of course, keep it simple. 30 seconds is plenty of time to explain what you're doing, what you're trying to accomplish with your book, and who you want to read your book. And then we're back to regular programming, if I can use that phrase. But keep it 30 seconds is plenty of time to explain without clouding other messages that are going on in the program. You just need 30. Make good use of those 30 seconds. If you have to rehearse. Write it down. See if you can, and then rehearse. If you're going well over 30 seconds, cut out some unnecessary words. Focus on the words that really matter.
All right, so you mentioned books or whatever. So why is it so important for a speaker to write a book on the topic in which they speak?
I think, first of all, it makes you look more like an expert. If you are going to take the time to write, you are going to have to do lots of research. It helps also if you have lots of experience in a particular area. So the book really just shows that you've done your homework, that you've done the research, and that, yes, you are now an eligible expert to speak to other people about the topic that you're writing about.
So in your career, and this is one of my more favorite questions I always ask my guests is, all right, give me an embarrassing moment, something that you did that was like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. But you were red-faced at the time, but a valuable lesson was learned, and it would be something you'd highly advise somebody not to do in front of an audience or on a microphone or whatever.
Well, first of all, make sure the microphone is not hot when you're speaking extemporaneously to somebody else on stage. So always make sure that you are speaking on topic when the host asks you to speak, or when the MC of the event introduces you. That's the key. I don't want to get too specific about what I may have said or on the mic, but people love to remember that sort of thing. So you want to make sure that your credibility is clean, and nothing's going to muddy your message. And a hot mic situation, we read about them every day. It happens to all of us. You would think that we would learn from the mistakes of others. I want to take this moment to remind everyone, to remind you that hot mics are potential career killers.
Well, and it's amazing to me though. Who was it? The radio guy, Don Imus, or what's
Yeah,
his name?
Don Imus.
You know, I mean, you can wreck a whole career by saying one stupid thing on the radio or in social media or whatever. It just amazes me.
And I have a thought about that. That easily could have been avoided during the prep. TV, radio people, podcast people, we all prepare for our shows. And who you have in the room with you during prep is extremely important. The remark that I recall Don Imus making, I won't repeat it, but what got him into trouble is probably very simple. There was probably a lack of diversity in the prep room or wherever they meet to discuss the next day's show. If you have younger people, more diverse people around you, they will hear some of that and they'll say, you know what, I think we need to stay away from this or change the wording here. So surround you. As you get older, we fall, we suffer from what is the hardening of the references, as a way to put it. So surround yourself with young, smart, diverse people who come from all over. And I think that will help greatly to avoid the kind of mistakes that happened to Mr. Imus.
All right. So, what advice do you have, Dan, for speakers that don't have broadcasting experience?
Well, it's very simple. Some people, a lot of people, including writers, are introverts. We're used to working alone. Even radio people, we're used to working in a studio without too many people around us. We're speaking in a darkened room into a microphone. Uh, the key, however, is to and I learned this early on. One of the earliest lessons I learned in radio is to take a photo of a friend or a loved one and tape it to the copy stand. If you're giving a speech in an auditorium at a convention, tape it to um, the podium, or imagine this loved one standing in front of you and speak only to them. And that will also help hone your message because when you're speaking again to one person, everybody in the room will feel like you're speaking to just them. So you got a two-fer there. You're easing your nerves, but also honing your message into that one person. If all else fails, borrow a trick attributed to Winston Churchill when he is alleged to have said, "I imagine my audience in their underwear."
All right. So, your latest book, DIY Book Promo, I'm gonna pull from your brain 2 or 3 tips that you would have for anybody that has a book, but obviously speakers need to have a book. But what are some ways that they can promote their book without spending money?
Well, key to this is using your email, especially to pitch bookstores. I have written to every bookstore in the US that sells new books and bookstores in the UK, Canada. It's very much worth your time before your book comes out. Try to do this a month or two early. You have a good pitch letter with a review, an excellent review, include the ISBN number, and then once you get a hit, a bookstore says, I think we're going to order this. This sounds really interesting. Our customers are going to love this. Ask them for a photo of, the smiling bookseller holding your book. These are engagement gold. So what we're really talking about is co-branding with indie bookstores. Make sure that you talk to go and visit every independent bookstore within an hour's drive, maybe 2 hours from your home. Introduce yourself, make sure that they understand that your book is coming out. And again, maybe pitch yourself for an event, a signing event. Signing events are key because then you have a news hook when you pitch media. When in your pitch letter, include the review again. You don't need the ISBN number, but tailor your message to them. Make it important to the TV host, or podcast host why your book matters. It could be a seasonal hook. Let's say you wrote a horror novel. Well, that October is the season for this. If you wrote a beach read, that's perfect for June or anytime in summer. Let's say you have a book that has a topical hook or is in line with a national celebration like Juneteenth or Pride Month or Memorial Day or Veterans Day. Make sure that that the local media and even state regional media understands what your book is about, and they might bring you on because, again, there's a news hook. So making yourself media friendly, if I can use that phrase, is extremely important.
All right. So, what type of access do you feel that a speaker or an author should have online so that people can check them out and see that they're the real deal? What are must-haves on a website or whatever?
Well, make it so much. You need to make it so easy for people to find you. So having a website and trying to make that the website doesn't have to be your name. It could be about the topic that you're writing. So websites are an expense. And yes, I try to help my authors who don't have a whole lot of money, maybe in their budget, to promote themselves. There are websites out there, web builders that are free. You can get a free website if you use their URL. That's one way you can do it on the cheap. If you want to invest a little bit more, you can get yourname.com as the URL. So that's the most important thing. Obviously, social media, even though you have somewhat limited control over your content there, it's extremely important to be easily recognizable. So make sure that your social media matches your audience. If you're speaking to professionals mainly, and that's your audience, you should be on LinkedIn and easily findable on LinkedIn. I use Facebook as well, and Instagram, because book covers, smiling booksellers holding your book, whatever. That's important on Instagram. And the other thing that you want is an email list. I've been collecting emails for a very long time, and that's a very effective, efficient way to reach your audience, is having a really good email system, list rather, and having an email capture on your website is a nice feature.
So I tend to think that most authors don't promote their book far enough in advance. So what's your window, Dan, for when you should actually start actively promoting a new book?
Well, it helps to start early when your book, when you sign the contract with the publisher, for example. That's an opportunity. That's what we're really talking about, is opportunities to send alerts, whether through email, whether on social media. I've just signed a contract with this publisher, and they're going to release my book in 6 months. And then there are developments. We've got a cover reveal for this, or you might even suggest a month or two out to your publisher, hey, let's do a cover competition. Let's have the readers, my social media followers, weigh in on which cover, A or B, to use for the book. That's a nice hook. Obviously, there are tons of things that you want to do before your book comes out, including getting reviews. So having a review copy available months in advance is very, very helpful. But I don't want those listening right now to think that, okay, we had our book launch, we're done. Let's move on. We could forget about the current book. I spent 3 years promoting a vampire novel that I published in 2020. This is the book that actually, this is the campaign that I used to inform DIY book promo, all the lessons that I learned from that previous campaign. So you can keep promoting your book as long as you want, because it will be new to somebody, no matter how many years after the release. As long as the book is in print, as long as you can easily find it on all the major online retailers or even in your indie bookstore.
So speaking of DIY book promo, Dan, where can people pick up your book? And we'll make sure this appears in the show notes down below.
Well, you can find it in all the usual online places, Amazon, or Barnes & Noble, even Walmart.com has it. But I would encourage those who want to purchase my book, DIY Book Promo, to ask about it at their local independent bookstore. I have spent a long time co-branding with mom and pop bookstores. And so I would encourage you to support a business in your community. Of course, more of your dollars will remain in the community when you support a local business. They'll have it for you. If it's not on their shelves, they'll have the book for you in 2 or 3 days max.
All right, outstanding. All right, Dan, so any final words of wisdom for the aspiring speaker out there?
Just believe in yourself and what your message is. And if you're thinking about writing a book, do it, because that will actually help focus thoughts, and it will help you reach more people to send your message to.
All right. All right. Dan, thank you so much for being my guest on this episode of the Spotlight on Speaking show. I wish you the greatest of success in all that you do. And to all my listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to have you here. And as always, I wish you the greatest of success in all that you do. And may this year be your greatest year yet. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
This has been the Spotlight on Speaking show with Bret Ridgway. Be sure to join us every week as we interview speaking industry pros and have them share their best tips for building a profitable speaking business. Until next week, thank you for tuning in, and remember to visit our website at spotlightonspeaking.com so you can enjoy even more great episodes like this one. While you're here, be sure to subscribe via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Spotlight on Speaking show. Until then, our sincere best wishes to you for the greatest of success as you work to build your own profitable speaking business.